The desperate call, the silver towers of Zephyr Prime had once reached toward the stars like fingers of hope. Now they crumbled into dust as the Devourers consumed everything in their path. Elder Corvash pressed his elongated hand against the viewing port of the High Council chamber, watching his world die one building at a time. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled peacefully for over 10,000 years. Their crystalline cities floated on clouds of pure energy, and their people had evolved beyond the need for violence. War was a concept they read about in ancient texts, something primitive species did before they learned wisdom. They had no armies, no weapons, no understanding of conflict beyond philosophical debate. "How long do we have?" Corvash asked without turning from the window. His voice carried the musical quality of his people, even when heavy with despair. "The central computational matrix estimates 47 standard cycles before total planetary consumption," replied scientist Nyx, her blue-tinted skin pale with fear. "The outer colonies fell silent 3 cycles ago. We are the last." The had appeared from the deep void 6 months earlier. They were not organic beings, but something far worse. Mechanical entities that consumed all organized matter and energy, growing stronger with each world they destroyed. They moved like a plague across the galaxy, leaving nothing but empty space. In their wake, Corvash finally turned from the window. His large, dark eyes held the weight of his species' extinction. "Show me the ancient archives again, the ones from the first era." Nyx activated the holographic display with a gesture. Ancient symbols appeared in the air, written in a language so old that only the most learned scholars could translate them. The text spoke of beings from the realm of endless storms, warriors who thrived in chaos and found strength in struggle. "The translation is uncertain," Nyx said hesitantly, "but it speaks of those who dance with death and call it home." The texts described them as living on worlds that would kill any civilized being. "Deathworlders," Corvash whispered. It was a term used only in the oldest stories, creatures of legend that even the first-era Zephyrians had considered mythical. The chamber shook as another section of the city fell to the Devourers. Through the transparent walls, they could see the mechanical swarm moving like liquid metal, breaking down everything they touched into base components before reassembling it into more of themselves. "Elder, we must evacuate," urged Captain John, the highest-ranking officer in their peaceful security force. His people had been trained for crowd control and natural disasters, not war. Against the Devourers, they were helpless. Corvash moved to the central communication array, his fingers dancing over controls that had been designed for scholarly research and peaceful contact with other civilizations. "Send a message to the Outer Rim territories. Broadcast on all frequencies." "What message, Elder?" Nyx asked. "Everything. Our coordinates, our situation, the nature of the threat. Cast it into the void and pray that someone, somewhere, might hear us." Corvash's voice grew stronger. "If the ancient texts speak truth, then perhaps the Deathworlders still exist." Nyx looked troubled. "Elder, even if such beings exist, would we want their help?" The texts described them as creatures of violence and warfare. "Child," Corvash said gently, "we are about to become extinct. Perhaps it is time to learn that sometimes violence is the only answer to a violent threat." The message went out that day, transmitted on quantum frequencies that could reach across half the galaxy. It carried with it the history of the people, their culture, their knowledge, and their desperate plea for help. Most importantly, it carried their location .30-7 light-years away. in a solar system marked on galactic charts as Sol 3. The message was received by a deep space monitoring station orbiting the third planet. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was halfway through her night shift when the alien transmission came through. Holy ... She breathed, staring at her screens as the translation protocols worked to decode the message. Earth had been monitoring space for potential alien contact for over 2 centuries. But this was the first genuine alien communication they had ever received. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. An advanced civilization was facing extinction from some kind of technological plague. They were asking for help from anyone who might receive their message. Sarah immediately patched the communication through to Fleet Command on Earth's surface. Within an hour, the message had reached Admiral Marcus Thompson, head of the Terran Space Defense Force. Sanson stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Colorado Mountains, surrounded by holographic displays showing the alien message and its point of origin. Around him, the best military minds on Earth studied the data with a mixture of excitement and concern. "Sir," said Dr. Alina Vasquez, Thompson's chief science advisor, "the technology described in this message is centuries ahead of anything we have. These beings have faster than light travel, matter manipulation, and energy sources we can barely comprehend. And they're losing to these devourers," Thompson replied grimly. "What does that tell us about this threat?" Colonel James Mitchell, the Admiral's strategic advisor, stepped forward. "Sir, if these aliens are as peaceful as their message suggests, they might not have the experience to fight a war. They're asking for help, not sending a warning. That means they believe whoever receives this message might be able to do something. They cannot." Thompson studied the data again. Humanity had spent the last 3 centuries preparing for potential alien contact, but they had always assumed they would be the less advanced species. The idea that Earth might possess something an advanced alien civilization needed was both thrilling and terrifying. "Dr. Vasquez, how long would it take to reach their location?" "With our fastest ships and experimental quantum drives, approximately 14 days. But sir, we're talking about sending human vessels into completely unknown space to face a threat that has already destroyed multiple alien worlds." Thompson was quiet for a long moment. Earth had no colonies beyond their solar system, no deep space military presence, and no experience with interstellar warfare. They were being asked to help beings whose technology made human achievements look primitive, but there was something else in the alien message that resonated with him. The desperate hope of a dying people, reaching out to strangers for salvation. It reminded him of humanity's own dark history, the times when entire civilizations had fallen and only outside intervention had saved them. "Colonel Mitchell, what ships do we have available for deep space deployment?" "The carrier Endeavour just finished her shakedown cruise. She's equipped with our newest experimental weapons and shielding. We also have 3 escort frigates that could make the journey. Crew complement. The Endeavour carries 1,200 personnel, Marines, pilots, engineers, scientists. The escorts add another 600. Thompson looked round the room at the faces of his staff. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth from threats, both known and unknown. Now they were being asked to extend that protection to beings they had never met, in a war they didn't understand. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, "we don't know what we're walking into. This could be a trap, a test, or simply a situation beyond our ability to handle." Dr. Thompson replied, 37 years ago, the Zephyrians sent out a desperate plea for help. They believed that somewhere in the galaxy, There might be beings capable of fighting when they could not. They were looking for warriors from what they call Deathworlds. He paused, looking at the tactical display showing Earth's position. They were looking for us. Captain Alina Vasquez stood on the bridge of the starship Endeavour as it prepared for humanity's first interstellar military deployment. She was 38 years old, had commanded 3 different vessels in Earth's defense fleet, and had trained for first contact scenarios since joining the service 15 years earlier. Nothing had prepared her for this moment. All stations report ready, Captain, announced her executive officer, Commander David Park. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, checking systems that had been designed specifically for deep space combat operations. Dr. Sarah Chen, our xenobiologist, reports that the science teams are prepared for contact with the Zephyrian survivors, Park continued. Medical is standing by with isolation protocols in case of biological incompatibility. Alina nodded, watching the tactical display that showed her small fleet. The Endeavour was humanity's most advanced warship, armed with railguns, plasma torpedoes, and defensive shields powered by fusion reactors. The 3 escort frigates carried additional firepower and served as support vessels for extended operations against the threat described in the alien message. She wondered if it would be enough. Captain, called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station, we're receiving final authorization from Fleet Command. We are cleared for departure. Alina looked out at the stars visible through the main view screen. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was dying while they waited for help that might never come. Humanity was about to announce its presence to the galaxy, not as explorers or diplomats, but as warriors answering a call for aid. All ships, this is Captain Vasquez. Today we carry with us the hopes of 2 civilizations. We go not as conquerors, but as protectors. We represent the best of humanity, and we will not let these people die on our watch. She paused, then gave the order that would change everything. Helm, engage quantum drives. Take us to Zephyr Prime. The Endeavour and her escorts disappeared into hyperspace, leaving Earth behind as they raced toward a dying world and an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. They carried with them the accumulated knowledge of human warfare, tactics refined through millennia of conflict, and the unshakable belief that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to fight for it. Behind them, Earth continued its orbit around the sun, unaware that its children were about to reveal to the galaxy that some worlds forged their children in fire, creating beings who could stand against the darkness when all others fell. When Deathworlders answered the call, the quantum wake signatures appeared on Zephyr Prime's sensors like ghosts, materializing from the void. Elder Korvash felt his heart flutter with something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Someone had heard their desperate call. Elder, we're detecting 4 vessels emerging from hyperspace at the system's edge, reported Nyx, her voice tight with nervous energy. Their technology is primitive compared to ours, but they're moving with purpose. Korvash straightened, in his command chair, watching the tactical display as the unknown ships approached. They moved in a tight formation, their paths calculated and precise. After months of watching the chaotic, destructive advance of the Devourers, there was something deeply reassuring about the ordered approach of these newcomers. Can we establish communication? Working on it now, Elder. Their transmission protocols are basic but functional. They're using electromagnetic radiation and digital encoding. Very simple, but effective. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the face of a being unlike any in the galactic records. The creature had bilateral symmetry like the but its features were harder, more defined. Its skin was a warm brown color, and its eyes held an intensity that made Corvash's breath catch. "This is Captain Alina Vasquez of the Terran vessel Endeavour. We received your distress call. What is your current situation?" Corvash found his voice after a moment of stunned silence. "Captain Vasquez, I am Elder Corvash of the Zephyrian people. We... We did not expect anyone to answer. Are you truly here? To help us?" Elena's expression softened slightly. "That's what we do, Elder. We received your message and came as quickly as we could. Can you provide us with tactical information about these devourers?" As Corvash began explaining the nature of their enemy, the human ships moved closer to Zephyr Prime. What the Zephyrians saw made them question everything they thought they knew about civilization and survival. The human vessels were scarred and angular, built like weapons rather than the elegant, artistic ships the Zephyrians were accustomed to. They bristled with what could only be weapons systems, and their hulls showed signs of frequent repair and modification. These were not exploration vessels or diplomatic ships. These were warships, built by a people who understood conflict. "Captain," Dr. Sarah Chen called from her station aboard the Endeavour, "I'm reading the atmospheric composition of their homeworld. This is impossible." Alina glanced at the data her science officer was transmitting to her personal display. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "Their planet has perfect environmental controls, artificially maintained atmosphere, and energy fields that create ideal living conditions. But according to the background radiation and geological data, this world should be uninhabitable. The gravity is too low, the magnetic field is too weak, and the star's radiation output is inconsistent. They terraformed their world." "No, Captain. They built their civilization despite their world's natural hostility. They created paradise on a planet that wanted to kill them." Sarah paused, reviewing more data. "But that's not the shocking part. Our ship's sensors are also scanning the devourers on the planet's surface." Alina felt her blood run cold. "What are we looking at?" "Self-replicating machines that consume organized matter and convert it into more of themselves. They're like a technological cancer spreading through the galaxy and devouring everything in their path. Based on their consumption rate and distribution pattern, they've already destroyed at least 15 civilizations." The magnitude of the threat became clear as Alina studied the tactical data. The devourers moved like a swarm, breaking down everything. They encountered and using the raw materials to build more units. They had no central command structure, no vulnerable points, and no apparent limitations on their growth. "Elder Corvash," Alina said, turning back to the communication screen, "how long have you been fighting these things?" Corvash looked confused by the question. "Fighting, Captain. We are not warriors. We have no weapons, no military forces. We have been trying to evacuate our people and preserve what we can of our civilization." Alina exchanged glances with her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos. The Zephyrians had faced an existential threat for months without mounting any kind of resistance. They were truly a peaceful people, caught in a war they were incapable of understanding. "Elder, with your permission, we'd like to send down survey teams to assess the situation. We may be able to help." "Of course, Captain. But I must warn you, the Devourers consume any technology they encounter. Many of our rescue vessels have been lost simply by approaching too close to affected areas." Alina smiled grimly. "Don't worry about our people, Elder. We know how to handle hostile environments. 2 hours later, Major David Chen led a mixed team of Marines and scientists down to Zephyr Prime's surface. They landed in a city sector that had been partially consumed by the Devourers, using stealth shuttles designed for insertion into hostile territory. The scene that greeted them was like something from humanity's worst nightmares. Beautiful crystalline buildings were half dissolved, their elegant curves interrupted by the geometric patterns of Devourer construction. The machines moved through the ruins like metallic insects, methodically breaking down everything they encountered. "Jesus," whispered Sergeant Lisa Park, watching through her helmet's display as a Devourer unit absorbed a fallen piece of architecture and immediately began extruding new components. "They're like 3D printers from hell." Dr. Michael Roberts, the team's xenotechnology specialist, was scanning one of the dormant Devourer units with equipment shielded against their absorption capabilities. "Major, these things are incredibly sophisticated. They're using quantum-level manipulation to break down matter at the molecular level. But there's something interesting about their programming." "What do you mean, Doctor?" "They're designed to consume organized structures and technology, but they have built-in limitations. They can't process organic matter effectively, and they seem to be programmed to avoid anything they can't immediately categorize and consume." Major Chen studied the tactical situation. The Devourers were spread throughout the city in a predictable pattern, following the most efficient consumption routes. They moved like an army, but an army that had never encountered resistance. "Doctor, what would happen if they encountered something that fought back?" "Based on their behavior patterns, I don't think they're programmed for active opposition. They've been consuming peaceful civilizations that couldn't mount effective resistance. They might not know how to handle aggressive countermeasures." Chen activated his communication system, connecting directly to Captain Vasquez on the Endeavour. "Captain, we may have found a weakness. These things have never had to fight a real war." Alina received the report with a mixture of hope and determination. Humanity had spent its entire history learning to fight, to adapt, and to overcome threats that should have destroyed them. Earth had forged its children in conflict, teaching them that survival sometimes required violence. "All ships, this is Captain Vasquez. We're going to show these machines what happens when they threaten the wrong species." The battle for Zephyr Prime began with a coordinated orbital bombardment that caught the Devourers completely unprepared. The human ships had studied their enemies' behavior patterns and identified critical nodes in their expansion network. Plasma, torpedoes, and railgun rounds struck these points with surgical precision, disrupting the machines' coordination and creating chaos in their ranks. On the planet's surface, human Marines deployed using tactics that had been refined through centuries of asymmetric warfare. They moved in small teams, hitting the Devourers at their weakest points and disappearing before the machines could adapt. They used weapons specifically designed to disrupt the quantum fields that Devourers relied on for matter manipulation. Elder Korvash watched from the orbital command center as his dying world began to fight back for the first time. The humans moved like predators, striking fast and hard before melting away into the urban terrain. They turned the Devourer's own efficiency against them, using the machine's predictable behavior patterns to set traps and ambushes. "How are they doing this?" Nix asked in amazement. "The Devourers have consumed entire star systems. How are these primitives stopping them?" "They're not primitives," Korvash said quietly, finally understanding what the ancient texts had tried to tell them. "They're Deathworlders. They come from a place that taught them to fight for every breath, every day, every victory. They know Things we never had to learn. The tide of battle turned when Captain Vasquez made a decision that shocked the Zephyrians. Instead of trying to preserve the remaining city infrastructure, she ordered her ships to collapse several urban sectors, trapping thousands of devourer units in debris that their programming couldn't efficiently process. "Captain," Dr. Chen called from her station, "the Zephyrians are asking why we're destroying their cities. Tell Elder Corvash that sometimes you have to break something to save it." Alina replied, watching as the trapped devourers began consuming each other in their confusion. "We're not trying to preserve their architecture. We're trying to preserve their people." The final phase of the battle came when the human forces discovered the Devourer's master replication facility hidden beneath the planet's surface. Major Chen led a strike team through underground tunnels that the machines had carved in their consumption frenzy, moving through darkness and hostile terrain that would have killed most galactic species. They planted fusion charges at critical points throughout the facility, using Earth-developed explosives that created quantum disruption fields. When the charges detonated, they didn't just destroy the replication center, they created a cascading failure that spread through the entire Devourer network on the planet. Within 6 hours of the humans' arrival, Zephyr Prime was free. Elder Corvash stood on the observation deck of the human ship Endeavor, looking down at his world as the last of the Devourer swarms fell silent. The cities were damaged, the landscape scarred, but his people were alive. "Captain Vasquez," he said, turning to the human commander, "we cannot adequately express our gratitude. You have saved our entire civilization." Alina nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Elder, the threat isn't over. These machines came from somewhere, and there may be other swarms moving through the galaxy. Your people need to be prepared." "But we are not warriors, Captain. We know nothing of violence or warfare." "Then you'll learn," Alina said simply. "We'll teach you. The galaxy is not always a peaceful place, and sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be ready to fight for it." As the human ships prepared to escort the surviving Zephyrian vessels to safety, Elder Corvash realized that his people's age of innocence was over. They had learned that the universe contained threats that could not be reasoned with or negotiated away. But they had also learned that somewhere in the darkness, between the stars, there were others who had faced such threats and survived. The humans called themselves Deathworlders, beings forged in conflict and tempered by struggle. They had answered a desperate call for help from strangers, traveled across the galaxy, and risked their lives to save a people they had never met. As the combined fleet departed Zephyr Prime, heading for the secure worlds of the inner systems, both species carried with them the knowledge that they were no longer alone. The Zephyrians had learned that survival sometimes required strength, and the humans had learned that their hard-won skills could be used to protect those who could not protect themselves. In the vast darkness of space, where ancient evils stirred, and civilizations rose and fell, a new alliance had been born. The galaxy would never be the same.